So for the last couple of days, a lot of headlines in the media about the Russians harassing, quote unquote, American jets in Syria. Let me play you some of these clips, okay? This was released by the Americans. One of their Reaper drones was harassed by a Russian jet, which popped its flares, okay? Take a look. So this is the camera on the back of the drone, all right? And you can see the Russian pilot pulling up. So yeah, this is the infrared camera. You can see the heat signature from the flares. Flares are countermeasures. When a surface-to-air missile or a missile from another plane locks onto a jet, one way of evading those, one way of evading those threats is to pop what are known as flares, right? Or countermeasures. They're basically very, very, very hot, like the engine of the plane, and so they confuse the guidance system of whatever payload or ordnance is being used to target the jet. Now, obviously, a drone, not exactly the biggest threat in the world to a Russian jet, and yeah, it's a bit provocative. But you know what is also provocative? Having U.S. jets in Syria. Once again, I'm going to take out my globe here. The United States is here, okay, and Syria is all the way here. What are U.S. jets doing there in the first place? Russia and Syria have a defense pact. They've had a shall we say, a security agreement. It's not as big as a defense pact, but nevertheless, right? The United States invaded Syria. Okay, Russia did not invade Syria. Russia was asked to come to Syria by the Syrian government, and there's a military base, a naval base on the Mediterranean Sea in Tartus, which has been there since the early 1970s. Also, with the permission of the government in Damascus. So yeah, I know the Russians are being provocative. So are the Americans. So are the Americans. Here, let me play this clip. This is from 3 weeks ago, from CBS.
Well, now to some breaking news. The U.S. is accusing Russia of harassing U.S. military drones in Syria. This is the view from the Reaper drones. Officials say they were conducting a mission against ISIS when Russian fighter jets dropped parachute flares in front of them, forcing the U.S. drones to veer off course. One Russian plane flew in front of a drone and engaged its afterburner. The U.S. calls these actions reckless and unprofessional.
Yeah, so is being in Syria. That's also reckless and unprofessional. I can keep doing this all night, and I will. The thing is that, by the way, afterburner, for those of you who don't know, is the to put it in layman's terms, the turbo boost on the back of a jet. Okay, so obviously that's going to create a lot of unnecessary heat, and in this case, mess with the system. Now, look, the Americans they announced on July 17th. So this is 11 days ago, that now they're deploying more F-35s, or rather more F-16s and F-35s to Syria. So I told you guys before, there's a U.S. air base down here at the intersection of Syria, Iraq, and Jordan. So El Tanaf is right around this area, okay? Now, in addition to that, this entire area, I don't know what's in yellow, but I told you, maps without proper legends in the trash. So I can't tell you what's in yellow though. These are areas that the United States occupies. What a coincidence that all the oil and gas, well, the gas fields are over here, but all the oil fields and the farmland, what is called the breadbasket region. So, Syria grows a lot of wheat, a lot of cotton, self-sufficient country, self-sufficient. A net exporter of wheat, and now no bread. How? Well, sanctions are partly to blame, and so is occupation, right? They go hand in hand in this case. What a coincidence that the American bases and the oil fields, if you were to take both of these maps and transpose them, you would find a perfect intersection between the two, right? So the American response is to now escalate. Now, I know in their mentality and in the mentality of this PBS announcer who spoke for 20 seconds, maybe I should also speak for 20 seconds and call it a day. But, you know, she gives no context. She's just like, the Department of Defense gave me this document that says that Russians are harassing American jets. Good night. They literally just do readouts from the Pentagon, and that's it. You see, I give you both sides of the story. I tell you what you know the American position is, and what the Russian and Syrian position is. Now, the American position is that they're fighting ISIS. Okay, the United States is such a generous country, and you know, out of its benevolence, out of the pure goodness of its heart and all of its benevolence, decided to bring F-16s and F-35s all the way from the United States down here into Syria to fight ISIS. Tell me, my good friend, why does ISIS exist in the first place? Was I not telling you just a few moments ago that this whole issue arose in the first place and transpired because the United States and the United Kingdom invaded Iraq? You remove Saddam Hussein or someone like Saddam Hussein, you're going to get ugly gangs and groups that come out of the woodwork and take over. Lo and behold, you have ISIS. ISIS is a symptom, or actually a symptom is putting it mildly, it's a direct consequence of that invasion. And then it spread into Syria. So if anyone is to blame for the existence of ISIS, it's none other than the United States. You know, it's like a pharmaceutical company. They get you sick and then they try to give you the cure so they can make money. How come every time the U.S. kills some ISIS leader, he just so happens to be in the vicinity of NATO troops, meaning Turkish troops, who are also occupying Syria? So that's 2 NATO countries plus Israel occupying Syria. All right, just in case you lost count, which I understand. I don't know why I'm pulling out this map. We need the bigger one. Idlib, right? Going back to Idlib. So this is at the top over here. Now, keep in mind, this map is slightly outdated. It's from 2019, but the lines haven't moved since 2019, so it's actually quite accurate. Here is Idlib. You can see it's southwest of Aleppo, just slightly. It's both a governorate and a city, and this region is occupied by Turkey, right? So every time the U.S. kill an ISIS leader, he just so happens to be in Idlib. How does this make sense? I thought NATO and the United States, you know, are fighting ISIS, and yet the ISIS leaders keep turning up in the same place. Well, if the ISIS leaders are in Idlib, why is the U.S. occupying the other side of Syria in the northeast, in Hasakhin Deir ez-Zor? Why are you there? Oh, right, the oil fields. My bad. You see how this works? This is just like Africa in the Sahel with France, and we're going to talk about Niger and Africa in a moment, right? But I want to draw your attention to this article in Al Arabiya, which is a Saudi outlet, and they spoke to a U.S. official, and here's what he had to say. So this is last month, okay? But this situation is ongoing. So Russia's military forces in Syria have stopped adhering to agreed upon deconfliction protocols with American and coalition troops, a U.S. military official has told Al Arabiya English. U.S. and coalition personnel are in the country as part of a years-long mission to defeat ISIS. I really don't believe that. So to avoid any accidents or misunderstandings, these forces and the Russian military in Syria have had open lines of communication, especially in the air. To give you an analogy, it's kind of like the red phone in the Cold War, right? You after the Cuban Missile Crisis, to avoid any screw-ups like that again, you know, they had an open line of communication between Washington and Moscow, just in case, right? I'm giving you an analogy. It's not the same scale, but nevertheless, between the same actors. So I understand. Look, I'm not being sarcastic. I understand what the Americans are saying. Yeah, it's not nice to have a jet, you know, pop flares in front of your drone. It's not nice for them to, you know, activate the afterburner and screw with your drones. Fine. But none of these drones were shot down. Okay? They all work. They just needed to be repaired. And more importantly, they shouldn't be there in the first place. The whole reason ISIS exists is because the United States went to Iraq with Britain and the coalition of the willing. So the antidote is to leave Iraq alone. Okay, no one needs your help. No one needs it. The reason ISIS has shrunk is not because of the United States and NATO and the coalition, all right, or Operation Enduring Freedom. God, these horrendous goddamn names. Someone at the Pentagon, please do better. If you're going to invade the rest of the world, please come up with better names than this crap. Anyway, the reason ISIS has disappeared is because of Russia and Iran and Hezbollah. And I know some people don't like to hear that because they have issues with Iran and this, and I really don't give a crap. I'm here to report the truth and tell you what happened. That's the truth. The United States didn't do anything. The coalition didn't do anything. They caused all of this. Their attempts to get rid of Saddam, and then they hanged him, and to get rid of Assad, this causes a power vacuum, meaning ISIS. They caused this. And as I said, Turkey, a NATO country, is sheltering not just Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which is previously known as the Jabhat al-Nusra, which is previously known as Al-Qaeda in Syria. But on top of that, Turkey is sheltering ISIS leaders. That's why they keep showing up dead in Turkey's area of the occupation. What a coincidence. What a coincidence. Out of all the corners of Syria, all of the corners, it just keeps happening right where NATO is. What a goddamn coincidence. This is called tying up loose ends. In the mafia, they're done using you. This is tying up loose ends. Turkey and the United States are done using these guys. They didn't. That's how it works. So now when it comes to the escalation, right?
Well, now
between Russia and the Americans. The grain deal is perhaps the most recent example of an agreement between the West and the Russians going down the toilet. But there are many other examples where, the West just don't keep and don't hold up their end of the bargain. Syria never agreed to this. Syria is under no obligation to host U.S. troops. They have no permission to be there whatsoever. For all the energy people spend railing about, oh my God, Russia is in Ukraine. They don't say anything about this, And the fact people like her on CBS and PBS and BBC and ABC, they just repeat this like DOD bulletin points and, Russia's harassing the Americans. Yeah, so what? Let them be harassed. Go home. That's the whole point. You should go home. Once again, I will pick up my globe and point you on your way home. This is Syria, and the United States is all the way over here. These two have no connection with each other whatsoever. None. Okay? This issue has been going on way longer than Ukraine, right? We're talking about 20 years now. War of terror, right? Or war on terror, but I call it war of terror. So deploying F-35s and F-16s to the United from the United States to Syria. I mean, this is basically trying to send a message to the Russians that this Operation Enduring Freedom mission is not going anywhere, and we are staying here for as long as it takes. But some of you pointed out in the comments, and I'm going to read some of these. This is from Onia. Said, quote, "What irony! As we watch the perilous events in Ukraine, Syria might actually be the spark that sets the world on fire." Dante said, "What are U.S. jets doing in Syria anyway?" Martin says U.S. jets are probably giving air cover to ISIS. That's Israel's job, not the U.S. Meg says they're stealing oil. So Meg, answering Dante, says the U.S. jets are helping steal oil. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think they need any air cover. They do very well with these convoys that keep going between Iraq and Syria. But once again, I think the bottom line here is that yes, the Russians are perhaps not adhering to what they agreed on with the United States. So what? I think it's high time that the United States just left. The best way to avoid Russian jets harassing American jets is to not have American jets in Syria in the first place. They have no business being there, period. We're done. That's the segment.